The 80th birthday stands not merely as a milestone, but as a treacherous ridgeline. For those who reach it, there is a sense of victory, a hard-earned survival against the odds of history and biology. Yet, the statistics tell a story of rapid decline immediately following this age. A sudden, accelerated erosion of independence, vitality, and health that catches most families, and the individuals themselves, entirely by surprise. The common narrative suggests that this is simply the natural, unavoidable end state of the human body, a final collapse due to accumulated wear and tear. But this view is dangerously passive and critically incomplete. The truth is that the struggle to live well beyond 80, to maintain strength, clear thought, and autonomy, is often lost not to grand, obvious diseases, but to four quiet, invisible enemies that have been at work for decades, largely ignored until the damage becomes irreversible. These are not dramatic, acute illnesses that land you in the emergency room. They are subtle, chronic drains on the body's reserves, chipping away at the foundation of resilience. What we are discussing today is a matter of critical awareness. Reaching 80 requires more than luck. It demands vigilance and a precise understanding of these silent forces. Most people only begin to discuss these issues when the symptoms become painful, confusing, or restrictive. When the walker is needed, when the memory fades, or when the energy required to simply get out of bed is overwhelming. By that time, the opportunity to reverse course has been severely limited. We must confront the uncomfortable reality that many individuals who believe they are taking care of themselves are still unwittingly allowing these four hidden forces to accelerate their aging process, leading to frailty, dependency, and a loss of dignity that shortens their quality of life and ultimately their years. This is not about trying to live forever. It is about protecting your strength, your independence, and your peace of mind for as long as humanly possible, ensuring that your final decade or two are defined by wisdom and joy, not by confusion and pain. The first hidden enemy, the one that acts as a catalyst for the other three, is a systemic biological threat that doctors have given a name that is both technical and descriptive: inflammaging. This is an insidious process, a chronic, low-grade internal fire that burns slowly, constantly damaging cells, tissues, and organs from the inside out. Unlike the inflammation you see after a sprain, which is hot, painful, and visible, this is silent and internal. It is born from years of unchecked stress, exposure to toxins, consumption of processed foods, poor sleep, and insufficient movement. The body's ability to handle this inflammation weakens dramatically with age, especially after 80, meaning the minor insults you could ignore in your 50 seconds or 60 seconds become major threats to your entire system. This simmering inflammation slowly chips away at your resilience, increasing the risk of almost every major age-related crisis, from dementia and heart disease to the general state of frailty that characterizes the last years of so many lives. To address the struggle of living well beyond 80, we must first learn to recognize and extinguish this pervasive internal fire, or it will inevitably weaken the body's ability to withstand the other challenges that follow. We must gain the awareness necessary to fight this quiet yet powerful force that is working against the body as we age. The stakes are far too high for ignorance or complacency. We must move past the comforting myths that rapid decline is just how it goes. It is not an inevitable fate, but a common outcome resulting from a failure to recognize the quiet damage being done by forces like inflammaging, sarcopenia, fragmented sleep, and profound social isolation. These four factors are interconnected, each exacerbating the effect of the others in a destructive feedback loop. Understanding them is not about generating fear. It is about granting you power, the power to make small, steady changes that will profoundly shape how you move, think, and feel in your later decades. By the end of this discussion, you will be armed with the knowledge to confront these threats directly, to become the primary, informed guardian of your own longevity and dignity. This is your turning point, a decision to keep showing up for your body, your mind, and your purpose. Pillar 1, the fire within, deconstructing the threat of inflammaging. If we are to understand the swift decline that often follows the age of 80, we must first deeply examine the body's fundamental aging mechanism, which is relentlessly driven by chronic, low-grade inflammation. This phenomenon, known as inflammaging, is the secret accelerator of biological age, the unseen internal process that slowly damages cells and tissues, even in the absence of obvious disease or pain. It is fundamentally different from the acute inflammation, the swelling, redness, and heat that the body uses to heal a cut or fight a sudden infection. Acute inflammation is a powerful, short-term protective response. Inflammaging is a systemic, long-term breakdown. It is the body's repair systems running hot and inefficiently, generating collateral damage in the process. This chronic internal turmoil is often entirely missed in routine blood work until it has already caused significant harm to critical systems. For years, George, an 82-year-old in the original study, maintained what appeared to be a healthy lifestyle. He neither smoked nor drank, and he walked daily. Yet, he continually felt tired, stiff, and his mind was frequently foggy. His initial comprehensive blood work appeared normal, overlooking the subtle yet persistent rise in inflammatory markers that a specialist eventually identified. This quiet inflammation had been simmering for years, weakening his fundamental resilience. The body's ability to regulate this internal fire naturally weakens with age, meaning that the same lifestyle choices, like consuming processed snacks, enduring long periods of sitting, or suffering through poor sleep, that were manageable in one's 50s or 60s, begin to exact a devastating toll after the age of 80. Inflammaging is not just a general malaise. It directly impacts the most vital organs required for a strong and independent later life. It is a major driver of arterial stiffness and plaque formation, greatly accelerating the risk of heart disease. Crucially, it breaches the blood-brain barrier, introducing damaging compounds into the neural environment, increasing the probability and speed of dementia and cognitive decline. It weakens the immune system's ability to respond effectively, leading to a higher susceptibility to infections and slower recovery times. Furthermore, it contributes significantly to frailty, making the body less responsive to exercise and fueling the very cycle of weakness that leads to falls and loss of mobility. The internal fire of inflammaging consumes the body's reserves, silently chipping away at the capacity for self-repair and regeneration. This process is built up through years of exposure to a modern lifestyle, acting as a corrosive agent within the system. Stress, chronic psychological tension, elevate stress hormones, which are pro-inflammatory. Processed foods, particularly those high in refined sugars and certain industrial fats, actively fuel the inflammatory pathways. Poor sleep denies the body the restorative downtime needed to clear inflammatory byproducts, and a lack of movement fails to stimulate anti-inflammatory processes. Environmental toxins further compound this load. After 80, when the homeostatic mechanisms are less robust, managing this internal environment becomes the single most important task for preserving functional lifespan, the years spent in good health and independence. If you allow the flame to burn high, every other biological challenge, from muscle loss to poor sleep, becomes dramatically harder to overcome. The goal is to understand that the daily choices made now are not just about feeling good today, but about controlling the slow, decades-long damage that will define the shape of your 80 seconds and 90 seconds. The body is a closed system, and the cumulative effects of years spent ignoring the internal environment will eventually present themselves as stiffness, fatigue, memory loss, and sudden vulnerability to illness. Controlling inflammaging is the cornerstone of proactive aging, the essential first step toward defying the accelerated decline that characterizes the age of 80 for so many. By taking decisive action against this quiet enemy, we protect the very resilience that allows us to bounce back from the minor setbacks of later life, securing not just a longer life, but a stronger, more peaceful one. The anti-inflammation protocol. Diet and gut health for cellular peace. Controlling inflammaging is not a passive pursuit dependent on expensive treatments. It is an active, daily choice rooted in nutrition and mindful living. The most powerful tools against this internal fire are simple, often free, and immediately actionable. The cornerstone of the anti-inflammation protocol lies in shifting your diet from one that fuels the fire to one that extinguishes it. This means moving decisively away from the highly processed foods, refined sugars, and industrial seed oils that actively promote systemic inflammation, and embracing a way of eating that supports cellular tranquility. It is about adopting the mentality that food is not merely sustenance but medicine, a protective mechanism for your body's longevity. The focus must shift to whole foods, particularly those rich in antioxidants and healthy fats, such as deeply colored vegetables, berries, fatty fish, and nuts. But recent research highlights a more specific, frontline defense: the health of your gut microbiome. The gut is the body's largest immune organ, and an imbalance here is a direct, major driver of inflammation. To combat this, you must intentionally feed your gut with fermentable fibers, prebiotics found in foods like onions, garlic, bananas, and whole grains. These fibers produce short-chain fatty acids like butyrate, which are potent anti-inflammatory agents that soothe the lining of the colon and directly influence systemic inflammatory markers. This goes beyond simply eating healthy. It is about cultivating an internal garden that promotes peace rather than war. Simultaneously, incorporating fermented foods rich in beneficial bacteria, probiotics like natural yogurt, kefir, or sauerkraut, helps reinforce the gut barrier, reducing the leakage of inflammatory compounds into the bloodstream. Beyond nutrition, daily movement is non-negotiable in reducing the inflammatory load. Walking daily not only aids in circulation, but releases myokines, which are small proteins produced by contracting muscle tissue that possess powerful anti-inflammatory properties. Even simple, consistent movement acts as a continuous, low-dose, non-pharmacological anti-inflammatory agent. The aim is not high-intensity exercise, but consistency. Every single step, every minute spent not sitting, is a small act of lowering the internal flame. This consistent effort prevents long periods of sedentary behavior, which is itself a pro-inflammatory state that takes a heavier toll after 80. Finally, the protocol demands attention to stress and sleep. Chronic stress generates cortisol, a hormone that, while necessary acutely, becomes highly inflammatory when chronically elevated. Developing simple daily routines for relaxation, be it quiet reflection, deep breathing, or light stretching, is essential for lowering this baseline stress level. Furthermore, recognizing that poor sleep contributes directly to the inflammatory burden is crucial. The restorative period of deep sleep is when the body actively clears inflammatory waste. Therefore, prioritizing sleep health, which we will discuss in depth later, serves as a direct intervention in the fight against inflammation. The overall message is one of empowerment. You possess profound control over the internal environment of your body. By adopting these consistent, small changes, changing what you put on your plate, how often you move, and how well you rest, you are actively protecting your body's ability to stay strong long after 80. This proactive approach transforms the silent threat of inflammation into a manageable factor, securing the cellular peace required for sustained health and functional longevity. Pillar 2, the silent shrink, understanding sarcopenia and its fall risk. While inflammation burns the system from within, the second invisible enemy, sarcopenia, silently dismantles the architecture of strength and independence. Sarcopenia is the medical term for the age-related loss of skeletal muscle mass and function. It is a natural process that begins to accelerate after the age of 60, but after 80, this weakening accelerates dramatically, posing a profound and often sudden risk to a person's entire way of life. Most people do not recognize sarcopenia right away because it begins with subtle changes, not dramatic failure. They might attribute their difficulty opening a jar, their slow movement when standing from a low chair, or their increasing reluctance to use the stairs, to just getting old or feeling tired. This normalization of weakness is a dangerous form of denial. The problem with sarcopenia is that muscle is far more than just what provides strength for lifting or walking. Muscle is the body's silent protector. It is a metabolic powerhouse that helps regulate blood sugar, supports joints, and is absolutely critical for maintaining balance. When muscle mass disappears, the risk profile of the individual skyrockets. The body loses its protective padding and its crucial stabilizing force. The link between sarcopenia and the catastrophic fall is direct and brutal. A fall that might have been a simple bruise at age 60 becomes a hip fracture at age 84, as happened to Frank in the original analysis. What makes this loss so dangerous after 80 is the speed of the downward spiral it initiates. A fractured hip leads to weeks of mandatory bed rest. Weeks of bed rest lead to more weakness, accelerating the muscle loss that was already underway. This is a rapid onset loss of resilience, often leading directly to the need for permanent assistance, the walker, and the subsequent loss of freedom. The once active life quietly shrinks, confined by physical limitation. This is the most common path to losing independence in later life. Yet many still operate under the myth that muscle loss is an inevitable part of aging that cannot be resisted. This thinking must be decisively changed. Muscle loss is not a fixed fate. It is a metabolic state that can be slowed and in many cases reversed. The body, even in its 8th and 9th decade, remains capable of generating muscle fiber provided the correct signals in the form of resistance and sufficient protein are given. The goal is not to become a competitive bodybuilder, but rather to remain steady, mobile, and strong enough to keep doing what matters most. This may be gardening, grocery shopping, or simply getting out of bed safely each morning. Muscle is the ultimate currency of autonomy. When it is gone, independence is severely compromised. Understanding sarcopenia means recognizing that the little changes are the early warning signs. Struggling with a jar or rising slowly from a chair should be interpreted not as minor annoyances, but as urgent signals that the body's essential protective structure is failing. Intervening at this stage requires a fundamental shift in daily priorities, placing movement and nutrition at the center of the longevity strategy. Ignoring these subtle signs is akin to ignoring the early crack in the foundation of your home. Eventually, the entire structure is threatened by one small, sudden pressure. We must recognize that muscle is the key to maintaining the functional lifespan. The time spent living well, not just existing. Rebuilding the fortress. Protein timing and resistance movement after 80. The fight against sarcopenia, the silent shrink, is centered on two interconnected pillars: consistent resistance movement and strategic protein nutrition. It is a mistake to believe that once muscle mass is lost, it cannot be reclaimed. The cellular machinery for muscle synthesis remains responsive, even in the 9th decade of life, provided it receives the correct stimulus. The most critical intervention is movement that challenges the muscles, not simply movement for cardiovascular health. Walking regularly is essential for overall health, but to truly halt and reverse sarcopenia, one must engage in activities that involve resistance. This does not imply joining a gym to lift heavy weights, which may be counterproductive or dangerous. It means incorporating light, manageable resistance into the daily routine, using light weights like soup cans, bottles of water, or ankle weights a few times a week can be remarkably effective. Resistance bands are perhaps the perfect tool for older adults. They are inexpensive, portable, and provide scalable resistance for exercises like seated rows, chest presses, and leg extensions. The focus must be on consistency and performing movements that activate the major muscle groups used for daily function: the glutes, the quadriceps, the core, and the back. These small targeted efforts, done consistently, add up to a significant protective layer of strength. An emerging and highly effective strategy for compliance in older adults is the concept of exercise snacks. Instead of trying to force a single, long-duration workout, which can be exhausting, brief, high-quality bursts of movement are performed throughout the day. This could mean doing 3 sets of 10 chair stands every time you get up to make coffee, or using a resistance band for 3 minutes before each meal. These short, intense efforts send the necessary chemical signal to the muscle fibers to retain and rebuild without causing systemic fatigue. The goal is to stimulate, not exhaust, the muscle. Equally critical is addressing the nutritional stimulus: protein. After 80, the body develops a degree of anabolic resistance, meaning it requires a larger, more distinct signal to trigger muscle protein synthesis than it did in youth. Simply consuming enough protein throughout the day is no longer sufficient. The timing and distribution matter profoundly. The most effective strategy is to ensure protein intake is evenly distributed across all 3 main meals. Instead of front-loading carbohydrate intake at breakfast or waiting until dinner for a large protein serving, every meal should contain a significant protein source, at least 25-30 grams. This consistent signaling throughout the day keeps the muscle synthesis process running optimally. Good sources of protein include eggs, poultry, fish, dairy, especially cottage cheese and Greek yogurt, and legumes. This targeted nutritional approach, combined with resistance movement, transforms the aging body from a state of silent atrophy into one of maintenance and even gradual rebuilding. Rebuilding the fortress is not about achieving peak physical condition. It is about restoring the fundamental strength required to stay steady, mobile, and safe. It is the proactive investment that preserves dignity and independence, ensuring that the body remains a capable vessel for the wisdom acquired over 8 decades. This integrated approach defies the notion that decline is mandatory. Pillar 3. The broken cycle: how fragmented sleep ruins brain and body. The third invisible enemy that accelerates decline after 80 is the insidious erosion of restorative sleep. Many older adults, like Alice in the original case study, resign themselves to poor sleep, assuming that waking 3 or 4 times a night is simply normal at her age. This normalization is dangerous because it ignores the profound biological function of deep sleep, which is far more than mere rest. It is essential maintenance for the brain and the immune system. After 80, the effects of fragmented or shallow sleep become far more pronounced and destructive to functional longevity. As we age, the architecture of our sleep changes. We spend less time in the critical deep stages, slow-wave sleep and REM sleep, making the overall rest less restorative. When sleep is shallow or fragmented, the body's healing processes are severely disrupted. The most immediate and noticeable effects are the feeling of daytime fatigue, increased irritability, and, most critically, frequent forgetting of simple things. These symptoms are merely the surface manifestation of a deeper, more severe problem happening within the brain. The body repairs itself and the immune system resets during sleep. However, the most urgent function of deep sleep is the activation of the glymphatic system, the brain's unique waste clearance mechanism. During deep sleep, the space between brain cells actually expands, allowing cerebrospinal fluid to actively flush out metabolic waste products that accumulated throughout the day. Among the most critical of these waste products is amyloid beta, the protein associated with the pathology of Alzheimer's disease. When sleep is poor or interrupted, this critical waste clearance process fails. The brain does not get the opportunity to take out the trash. Over years of poor sleep, this accumulated toxicity contributes directly to cognitive slippage and accelerates the risk of dementia. Alice's experience of memory slipping and energy dropping after years of fragmented sleep is a direct illustration of this neurological failure. Her doctor correctly explained that sleep was essential for her brain and immune strength. The failure to adequately cleanse the brain leaves it vulnerable to inflammation, inflammaging, and further functional decline. Furthermore, poor sleep dramatically compromises the immune system. When Alice caught more colds, it was not a coincidence. Sleep is necessary for the immune system to reset and generate memory T cells that fight infection. A consistently sleep-deprived body is a body that is constantly on defense, unable to mount strong, effective responses to illness. This makes recovery from even minor infections a common thread after 80 much slower and more challenging. Therefore, confronting poor sleep is not a luxury. It is a fundamental health imperative after the age of 80. It affects how clearly you think, how steady you walk, how strong your immune system stays, and how much energy you have to enjoy the life you've built. The goal is not simply to sleep longer, but to sleep better, to achieve the deep restorative cycles necessary for brain cleansing and systemic repair. This requires recognizing that the struggles of sleep are often treatable and manageable, provided one adopts focused, disciplined habits. The restorative code: simple habits to secure deep and healing sleep. Because poor sleep is not an inevitable consequence of aging, but rather a manageable biological disruption, adopting a strategic restorative code is mandatory for anyone seeking functional longevity beyond 80. Improving sleep health requires focusing on simple, daily habits that reinforce the body's natural circadian rhythm and optimize the sleep environment. This is about making a sustained, low-effort investment that yields enormous returns in cognitive clarity, immune strength, and physical balance. The first and most critical step is maintaining a consistent bedtime and wake-up time, even on weekends. The body thrives on predictability. A regular schedule reinforces the internal clock, making it easier to fall asleep and stay asleep. This consistency is arguably more important than the total number of hours spent in bed. The second rule involves meticulous control of the environment. The bedroom must be a cool, dark, and quiet sanctuary. Temperature plays a crucial role in the initiation of sleep. A slightly cooler room facilitates the body's natural drop in core temperature required to fall into deep, restorative stages. Eliminating all sources of light, including subtle glows from electronics, is essential, as light exposure, even low level, can interfere with melatonin production, the hormone that signals the body it is time to rest. Third, what you consume and when profoundly impacts sleep quality. Limiting caffeine and alcohol is non-negotiable, particularly in the afternoon and evening. While many believe alcohol helps them fall asleep, it severely disrupts the later, restorative stages of sleep, leading to fragmentation and shallow rest. Similarly, consuming a large meal close to bedtime forces the digestive system to work when the body should be winding down, often leading to discomfort and interruptions. Creating a buffer of at least 2 to 3 hours between the final large meal and bedtime is a highly effective strategy. Fourth, leverage the power of natural light and movement during the day. Exposure to natural light, particularly in the morning, is the single most powerful tool for resetting the circadian rhythm. Spending time near a window or taking a short walk outdoors soon after waking signals to the brain that the day has begun, which in turn strengthens the signal for sleep initiation when darkness falls. Furthermore, even light movement during the day, which we discussed in the context of sarcopenia, helps to deepen sleep at night. A physically tired body rests better than a purely mentally tired one. This is why a short, consistent walk can be so beneficial, not just for strength, but for sleep architecture. Finally, establish a peaceful wind-down routine. The hour before bed should be dedicated to calm, predictable activities that signal safety and rest to the nervous system. This might include reading a physical book, listening to quiet music, or performing gentle stretching. Crucially, this routine must exclude screens, tablets, phones, and television, as the blue light emitted by these devices actively suppresses melatonin production, delaying sleep onset. After 80, good sleep becomes just as important as good food or safe movement. It is the protective shield for the brain against cognitive decline and the essential repair cycle for the entire body. Making sleep a priority is one of the smartest, most potent interventions one can adopt to stay well and preserve vitality. Pillar 4. The void of purpose, loneliness, identity, and the will to live. We now arrive at the fourth, and perhaps most surprising, hidden health reason why so many people struggle to live well beyond 80. Loneliness and the loss of daily purpose. This is a quiet, non-viral danger that affects more seniors than we often realize. It is not just an emotional hurt. It is a profound physical and biological threat. Studies have repeatedly shown that social isolation and the loss of a meaningful, consistent daily purpose can shorten life expectancy more than some chronic physical diseases. This psychological and emotional state has a direct, measurable impact on the body's health and resilience. As people age, their world often begins to contract. Friends pass away, children may move far away for career or family reasons, and physical limitations often stemming from the sarcopenia and inflammaging we have already discussed, make it harder to get out and maintain social connections. Slowly and often without intent, many older individuals spend more and more time not just physically alone, but emotionally isolated. This lack of genuine connection is a deep wound to the human spirit, which is fundamentally wired for interaction and belonging. The case of Bill, 88, illustrates this perfectly. His wife passed 5 years prior, and his children live in other states. He maintains his household, makes his meals, and watches television. Yet, he acknowledges that some days pass without speaking a single word to another soul. What he truly misses, he observed, isn't noise or activity, but the feeling of being needed. He misses the sense that someone is waiting for him, that his presence matters. This is the core issue, the loss of identity and social role that often accompanies retirement, the cessation of caregiving, and the waning of neighborhood involvement. For decades, an individual's identity is defined by their contributions, their career, their role as a parent or spouse, their participation in the community. When these social roles fade, the quiet sense of why get up today can become heavy. This emotional void translates into a physiological decline. Loneliness is a stressor that elevates cortisol, contributing to the cycle of inflammaging. It affects immune health, brain chemistry, and perhaps most importantly, the will to stay active. When there is no strong reason to engage with the world, the motivation to eat well, move, or sleep properly deteriorates, accelerating the overall decline. We must distinguish between solitude and loneliness. Solitude is a chosen time for peace and reflection, and it is a strength. Loneliness, however, is the painful feeling of being invisible or unneeded. The body registers this emotional pain, and the response is a biological shutdown that compromises health. Therefore, protecting one's sense of purpose must be treated with the same urgency as protecting muscle mass or ensuring deep sleep. It is, in many profound ways, a necessary form of medicine. The generativity solution, reclaiming purpose and connection through action. Addressing the profound danger of loneliness and the loss of daily purpose requires moving beyond passive lamentation into active engagement. specifically by embracing the concept of generativity. Generativity, in psychological terms, is the desire to contribute to the next generation, to leave a meaningful legacy, and to feel needed in the continuum of life. After 80, when traditional work and parenting roles have often ended, finding new avenues for generativity is the most powerful countermeasure to the void of identity and the resulting biological decline. This therapeutic value of contribution is essentially medicine for the aging soul and body. Purpose does not have to be grand or exhausting. It is found in the small, consistent acts that create rhythm, meaning, and joy. This might be as simple as watering plants consistently, a daily responsibility that ensures life continues, writing notes or sending cards to loved ones, affirming your ongoing presence in their lives, or making a regular phone call each morning to check on a friend or neighbor. These small acts replace the large, often stressful, demands of a professional life with gentle, sustainable responsibilities that reaffirm one's value. The smallest acts can create a stable, life-affirming rhythm. The most potent solution, however, often involves intergenerational connection. Older adults possess a wealth of wisdom, experience, and patience that younger generations desperately need but often lack exposure to. Becoming a mentor, even in an informal capacity to a grandchild, a neighbor's child, or a younger acquaintance, provides a vital exchange. Teaching a simple skill, knitting, balancing a checkbook, telling stories from history, or preparing a traditional recipe gives the elder a critical sense of usefulness and authority. This active contribution combats the feeling of invisibility. Crucially, reaching out is an action that must be initiated. The fear of being a burden often prevents older adults from asking for connection, leading to a vicious cycle of isolation. But reaching out, even if it feels awkward initially, often brings light and meaning to both the giver and the receiver. For the person reaching out, it breaks the isolation. For the person receiving, it grants them the purpose of being a supportive presence. This is why volunteering, even in a limited capacity, remains a highly effective prescription against loneliness. Furthermore, protecting one's purpose must be treated like protecting one's health. If gardening brings meaning, then finding ways to safely continue gardening, perhaps with adaptive tools or assistance, becomes a priority over simply stopping because it is harder. If making those daily phone calls is your purpose, then ensuring your communication tools are functioning is a health intervention. We must ask this simple, vital question: what brings you purpose right now, and how can you protect that purpose like it's medicine? When someone feels invisible or unneeded, the body responds by compromising the immune system and depressing vital brain chemistry. Conversely, when an individual feels valued, their will to stay active, to move against sarcopenia, to seek better sleep, and to manage inflammation is dramatically reinforced. Loneliness is a systemic crisis of late life, but generativity is the profound human answer. It reminds us that aging isn't about fading, it's about focusing on what matters most and continuing to contribute the hard-earned wisdom of a long life. The four-pillar mastery. Synthesizing the plan for a strong and dignified 90 seconds. If you have made it this far, you possess a clarity that most people approaching or living beyond 80 tragically lack. You understand that the accelerated decline, often observed in this decade, is not merely a sign of caring less, but a result of not knowing what was quietly working against the body. The four hidden forces: inflammaging, muscle loss, sarcopenia, poor sleep, and emotional isolation sneak in little by little. And by the time they manifest in full, the damage to resilience has already begun. Now, armed with knowledge, you are empowered to act. Mastery of functional longevity requires a synthesis of the four pillars into a unified daily strategy. These factors are not independent threats. They form a destructive feedback loop that must be broken at multiple points simultaneously. For instance, fighting sarcopenia with movement, Pillar 2, directly stimulates anti-inflammatory myokines, Pillar 1, and improves sleep quality, Pillar 3. Simultaneously, fighting loneliness by reclaiming purpose, Pillar 4, reduces stress hormones, which lowers systemic inflammation, Pillar 1, and reinforces the will to remain active, Pillar 2. The core of this mastery lies in small, steady, and consistent changes. No single intervention will guarantee a strong 90 seconds, but the cumulative effect of daily vigilance across these four areas will profoundly shape how you move, think, and feel in your later years. First, extinguish the flame pillar. 1. Inflammaging. Your focus must be on gut health and anti-inflammatory foods. Make a clear, conscious choice to reduce processed foods and refined sugars, which are pro-inflammatory. Increase your intake of prebiotic fibers and antioxidants, treating your plate as your primary medicine. Second, protect the fortress pillar. 2. Sarcopenia. Commit to resistance movement, even if it is just 5 minutes of exercise snacks per day, such as chair stands or using resistance bands. Distribute your protein intake evenly across all meals to continually signal muscle repair. Remember, strength is the currency of independence. Third, cleanse the brain pillar. 3. Poor sleep. Respect your need for deep, restorative rest. Maintain a consistent sleep schedule and optimize your environment to be cool, dark, and quiet. Stop consuming caffeine and alcohol in the late afternoon and create a screen-free wind-down routine. Prioritize sleep as essential maintenance for your memory and immune system. Fourth, affirm the value pillar. 4. Loss of purpose. Actively seek and protect your sources of meaning and generativity. Maintain your daily rhythms and consciously reach out to foster connections, large or small. The feeling of being needed, of having a why get up today, is a fundamental determinant of your will to stay active and healthy. Aging is not about fading. It is about focusing. It is about choosing what truly matters, your dignity, your autonomy, and your ability to contribute and protecting those things fiercely. You have earned the right to live this stage of life with wisdom and strength. The transition to your 80 seconds and beyond is not an automatic sentence of decline, but a call to mastery. The time to begin this integrated strategy is not tomorrow, but now, today, with the next small, steady choice. Let this knowledge be a turning point, a decision to keep showing up for your body, your mind, and your purpose.